Simply, say you've got an organisation where family is one of the values, but there isn't actually, say, flexible working or maternity, paternity shared pay, or perhaps there's no events then when they actually encourage employees to bring along their family to kind of meet more cohesively as a team. That would be like a key example of how it's values on paper but not in action.
Hi everyone! Welcome to another episode of Poquillo the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Michael Glassock, who's a leadership and career coach, helping leaders create environments where people actually love their work. Imagine that. Michael, thank you so much for joining me as a guest today. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you for having me, Gabby. Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure. So I'm really looking forward to kind of diving into today.
Yeah, so and for those of you that don't know, Michael just came back from South Africa. And first thing he put on his schedule is to do a podcast with me. So yeah, thank you so much for doing that, because I'm pretty sure you're still recovering from that long journey back home.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I was looking forward to this, but I do really enjoy podcasts, and as long as if you have them with the right people, you get some real valuable conversations. So yeah, no, I'm just grateful to be here. It's slightly out of shot, but there's if you are watching as opposed to listening, there is a little poster, a little magnetised poster of Cape Town. So I've still got I got my little bit of South Africa I'm holding on to. So it's all good.
Maybe the next episode we do, you're gonna be over there.
Yeah, absolutely. Who knows? Who knows?
Okay, well, usually how I start the podcast is that, I want our audience to have a little more context as to who you are, your background. So we were in a previous conversation, and you mentioned, that you were promoted 5 times in 6 years at NHS, which is super impressive. Mm-hmm. But then it shifted to helping leaders to create environments where they actually love what they do. So could you just, tell us about that journey?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, really enjoyed my time in the NHS. The NHS is the National Health Service in the UK. Essentially, it's a health service helping people from all different kind of injuries or accidents, minor to kind of major. So my time, I did various different things. I'm what you call a second generation immigrant, so that means my mum is Jamaican and my dad was born in London. And the reason why I kind of mention that is I actually wanted to chase kind of money quite early for stability as opposed to like big purchases. So I went into accounting, went into business and all that stuff. Went really kind of quite quickly realised it wasn't a fit for me. And then finally kind of got the message when I fell into the NHS as a graduate. And that was really when I realised how important it was, yes, to kind of make a living and have stability, but also to help a cause wider than myself. And that's kind of where I found my home, really. So, and if you kind of look now, it's no surprise I'm also in coaching, because that was the thing I really enjoyed. So from there, joined as a graduate, kind of promoted, become a team leader, project manager, did different roles. But as I started to progress and kind of start getting closer more to like a director level, I would say, I was obviously working with directors, they were my line manager. I realised is they actually weren't that happy in their roles. They would make a lot of changes, but maybe not see the impact of the changes or the impact of their meetings. And I was starting to realise the higher I was going up, the less perhaps I was enjoying my role, because ultimately I just like helping people. So from there I started doing a few different things. I was lucky I was doing a few coaching qualifications and did kind of small ones, and slowly built up to the point where I then self-funded my own through the ICF, so that's the International Coaching Federation. And for me, I think once I'd done those coaching qualifications, it really told me what I loved to do. I remember when I finished my coaching qualification, you have to do a practice call with somebody. And as I finished the call, I was on my own. If someone heard me, they think I'm a crazy person. And I just said to myself, I have to do this for the rest of my life, because I just knew in that moment, this is the thing that I need to do. So yeah, from there, obviously, transition, changed careers, got more experience to build alongside my theory, because I wanted to do a really good job and actually serve people properly. And kind of worked at a university, worked at different organisations in outplacement around careers, to the point where I am now, where I can call it my role, my full-time job. I obviously run my own company in the coaching world, and get to kind of support people on their mission and their journeys now.
That's fantastic. When you were saying that, it, because it's like, okay, you started with accounting because, like, accounting, I feel like it's one of the most solid jobs. You will always have a job.
Yeah.
I don't think it will ever be replaced by AI.
Who knows?
And,
Who knows?
but then it's like, I don't feel fulfilled, right? And I think that was a like my case was very similar to that because, so I moved here to the US when I was 3. And yeah, a lot of the struggles were about money. So when I went to college, I was like, I'm gonna go to UT. It has a #1 program in accounting. I'm gonna do it. Took my first class in accounting. This is boring.
That was the same. That was the same.
Sorry, my accountants. I was like, I cannot. That is the only class that I had to drop in college
Yeah.
because I did so bad. And then I was like, okay, I need to find another path. And yeah, I would say that I would argue that you can do something that you love and also get money from it.
Yeah.
And then if you can generate the money you want, I would say still stick to something you like. Because as you were saying, as you went higher up the ladder, you were getting more bucks, but you weren't satisfied. And that feeling, I could not do that to myself.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think to be very clear, it's a nuanced approach. It's not find your passion, you never work another day. I don't quite subscribe to that. But if you think simply, if you enjoy to do something, you find the time to do it. You work kind of more hours. You might find it actually easier for you to do. So you find your state of flow. Some people are like, oh, how do you do that? You make it look so easy. And you're like, oh, I don't know. I just enjoy it. I just like doing that. And I would argue, especially in this way of world and how quick the world is changing due to kind of AI and other influences, if you find something you actually enjoy and you can do it then for 5 years, a decade going forth, you're going to improve, you're going to get better, you're going to find the connections, and you're going to put the work in at the end of the day to actually make that career success. So I think there's a balance to the approach of not just find your passion and that's it, you'll never work another day. But I think actually there's more credit where credit's due on that approach. And the only kind of key thing I would add to my story and to others, I suppose, is you only need to look at like COVID. COVID was a massive kind of catalyst where it forced people to stop. It forced people to stop. They had to self-reflect on their career and their wider lives, whether they liked it or not. And you found a massive change in people changing careers at COVID. Now, the key bit just to also add into my story as well was I had my equivalent to COVID with my dad. So my dad got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and although he had me later in life, he had me quite older, he was only in his maybe early 70s when he got diagnosed.
Oh,
and that, again, with all my professional interests, for me, that was also the key catalyst for me to make me realise, do I want to kind of plod along and do something I don't enjoy, but get to my early 70s, maybe I, experience something similar myself, hopefully not, and almost have regrets about how I spent my days and my time, because time is precious, whether we like to believe it or not. So that was also a real big moment for me to also personally reflect, to say, for the next 4, 5, 6 decades of my career, whatever that looks like, I actually don't want to have any regrets of that time. And that was another little thing that pointed me in the right direction. And that's why I do what I do now, because I don't want people to have that catalyst to then be forced. I want people to kind of, I suppose, have more greater self-awareness and self-reflection, so they can not only have the careers they want to do, but also run organisations that create workplaces for other people to join and also love what they do as well. So that's a key thing I forgot to add at first.
wow. Yeah, no, those are great points because, yeah, I think for me, there has been several events in my life that say, Gabby, you need to look at yourself and pivot. Like, it's time to change. And yeah, I would say that it's within your career journey. Maybe you're gonna start with something that you like, that you enjoy doing, and then you're gonna want to pivot, and that's also okay. You don't have to stick with something. And for the long run, there's always improvements, ways, other routes that you can take. Like I started in marketing and during college for my internships and did sales, then did customer success, and I'm doing operations. So I've had my fair share of different experiences, but yeah, just I think the key word that you said there is don't have regrets, because time does fly real quick, and sometimes you don't even notice. And which really leads me into the question I had for you today regarding values, right? For those leaders that are the center of driving big organizations, you basically work with leaders on value driven culture. And values, I feel like there was a series of time where it was all values, values, values. But what's the gap you typically see between what companies say their values are and what's actually happening in their teams, right? Because we want an environment that those employees enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I echo your comments around values, values, values. I think like most things in life, it was a bit trendy. It was almost trendy to talk about values, but I think I would argue they stood the test of time. And I think I've said this kind of before. I think unfortunately, because of the way maybe organisations, and they're not the only victim or only person to blame here, but because of some organisations' behaviour to values, so say company values, I think society as a whole has started to devalue the kind of concept and kind of see it more as a sales pitch or strategy to say, look at us as an organisation, these are our values, to kind of make them look good, but in practice they don't actually kind of play out. And so I think that's why I still feel quite passionate about values and the kind of the power they can have. And to your question about the gap I've illustrated a little bit there is they're kind of written on a wall, or they're on a mug or something like that. They're written somewhere in an organisation. And for instance, a key one, let's say, could be like fun or family. Family's quite a good one as well. Well, simply say you've got an organisation where family is one of the values, but there isn't actually, say, flexible working or maternity, paternity shared pay, or perhaps there's no events that when they actually encourage employees to bring along their family to kind of meet more cohesively as a team. That would be like a key example of how it's values on paper but not in action. They don't actually have an organisation that actually speaks the truth. Even something like around collaboration or teamwork or something like that, maybe it's not done kind of intentionally or kind of done to be mean, but their actual KPIs and their goals are actually more incentivised for individual success. Now, you need to have A-star players, we all know that, but that's another key way, like more practically, I suppose. Actually, do we need to look how we incentivise our staff? And if we've got a massive value we keep talking about, where it's team working or collaboration, are we actually playing that out in practice? Innovation, there's so many different ways and concepts, I suppose how you can see how we can maybe say one thing, but in our other hand, in action, it doesn't play out. So for me, that's once understanding an organisation where they're going well or not, I suppose you can start to understand, okay, maybe as a leader, if I know what my values are as a leader, especially as a senior leadership team, and we can perhaps speak about this in future, about how maybe they're triggered or, how they play out in certain events, you can see the cascading or knock-on effect it then has to an organisation and what an organisation then does. So for me, I'm all about putting values back into action. My 4 values, I very much live them now in terms of the career and the kind of choices I make now. And for me, it's important to allow people to have that understanding and move to a place where they're actually put in action as opposed to, written on a wall somewhere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and honestly, because we had a prep call to prepare for this podcast, and when you were talking about values, I was like, this is the first time that I actually thought like, oh, values can actually be a thing. It can't just be something in paper. Just because definitely in my personal life, I do have my core values, like, and regardless, of if I'm presented with a great opportunity, but it doesn't align with my values, like, I've left opportunities because of that, because I would feel guilty. It would go against me. I think that's super easy, but at a company-wide level, I was like, they're just trying to meet requirements. All right. And so, yeah, that leads me into that second question. When I was talking to you, you were sharing this mind-blowing framework with questions about triggers and emotions that I wrote down. And hopefully you can share them today. Could you walk us through, when a founder is frustrated or triggered, what should they be asking themselves right during those instances?
Yeah, no, good question. So I think it's a great question to kind of slowly move from. We know values are important. We know there's a difference between them in theory and actually being put into action. And I suppose, how can we make it more practical in terms of a leader or an organisation and all the rest of it? So I really love your question. So to speak on it, I suppose many things can trigger us. And what I mean by trigger us is usually we have a real strong response to it. This can be absolutely anything. But the key thing for me is whether you're really like kind of spiritual or whether you're really kind of an accountant, logical, data, numbers, what I would say is that situation can tell you a lot and can be really, really helpful. If we think about it, our emotions, our behaviours is all information, and all that information can be data to then make a decision on going forward. So if you were really triggered, my first question, to speak to that framework you're alluding to, is first and foremost to think about, when was the last time you were really triggered or furious? Now, maybe it's happened more recently, maybe it has happened a little longer ago. And when I say triggered or furious, like you can really feel it in your body, like your physiology, you can really feel it. For me, when I get really cross or really angry, my actual temperature of my body increases. I get hot, I get really kind of frustrated. So that's the first thing for me. It's not just someone's cut me up and you go, oh, and then you get annoyed and then you forget it in 5 seconds time. Maybe that is the example for somebody, but something that you really kind of, you sit on. Maybe it happened during the day, you get back home from work and you're still kind of ruminating, you're still thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing. Then from there, what I would love for people to think about is ultimately, what are some of like the emotions? What are the emotions you're feeling in that moment when that thing triggers you? So I'll give it a bit of an example. Your leadership, I'm leading a team meeting, and there's someone that's always really silent. They're always really quiet in my meetings, okay? And what I found was I actually posed them a question, and they kind of gave me a bit of a shrug of the shoulders, and they didn't even answer me in that meeting, okay? And that really triggered me, it really annoyed me, okay? So the emotions I'm feeling in that moment are frustration, I'm annoyed, I'm kind of in disbelief. It could be any of those emotions. The third question is, we've done the moment that's triggered you, what emotions you were feeling. The third question is, what emotions are you actually avoiding or trying to avoid? Now, in my situation, my kind of mythical situation, someone not speaking or shrugging their shoulders when I actually ask for some involvement, a question, would be, I'm really trying to avoid the fact that I'm, unworthy or being disrespected or that I'm not loved. Those are maybe some of the emotions I'm trying to avoid, because if this person's just shrugged their shoulders, I've given them a chance, I really want everyone to be involved, and they've completely passed me aside, that's going to make me feel really annoyed because I feel like I've been disrespected, I feel a bit shameful, I feel like I'm not loved because they don't even value my opinion. They've just kind of chucked it aside, okay? Then the final bit for me then is, what is your biggest fear that might be realised? What is the biggest fear that might be realised? Well, the biggest fear for me is that maybe I'm an imposter, people don't like me, people don't respect me, people don't care. People don't care about me, okay? Now, I appreciate you might think, crikey, Michael, it's just someone ignoring you, you need to calm down. But what I would say is, if we were to really dig into it, what you'll find is there's a cause, there's a reason for something that makes you annoyed or triggered, and 9 times out of 10, there's a more deeper feeling and deeper emotion that it's kind of bringing up. So if I find that I get really triggered when I'm disrespected or feel like I'm being disrespected, that's some information I can now work with going forward. Because let's say if I'm a senior leader and I'm in a situation where I feel disrespected and I have an emotional response, if I can tap into the fact that this has happened in the past, maybe I'm better able to deal with that emotional response in that moment and not say something or do something that then damages, the image, the kind of the image of my company as a wider whole, especially as a senior leader. So that's just like one kind of example off the top of my head. But for me, it's really important to really reflect, because all of this information is data, which you can then use to change your decisions, your actions going forward, and to finally think, so what triggered me? When's the last time I got triggered or furious? What emotions did I feel in that moment? What emotions am I trying to avoid? And then finally, it's kind of what the worst case scenario is. What is the biggest fear that might be realised? That they find out that I'm a fraud or that they don't like me. The reason why they said no to my sale was not because of price, it's because they're actually rejecting me. They don't like me, and that's my biggest fear. So that would be my framework for people to start working out, what triggers them, why, and how to then act on it going forward, is what I'd say.
Yeah, and I think this is really, really deep for leaders and like for founders of any business, because when you are a founder that's of a business, that business is like your baby. And so, this whole conversation, it was triggered because we know someone in our circle, right? And he was sharing how, he was so like, he was just writing this information, but I could imagine how mad he was from the way he was sharing those messages. I could imagine him like super, super red, like blowing steam, right?
Yeah.
And when you jumped into that conversation, he was actually like took a moment to think and say, oh, like, like, let me really reflect on this. And when you were digging deeper into that, maybe for that client, whatever they did, they just did it because of personal situations or whatever, but he was taking it really to heart. Like, he felt offended, because he loves his business and he really believes in what he teaches. And that was just super insightful for me because, yeah, again, as I have my Bokio business and everything that I do, I want to help founders with their operations. But yeah, I'm probably gonna have those experiences that they are not so great. And I need to take a moment to pause, reflect, analyze what's going on. And that's where like the values are really important. They need to kick in. I also was having a conversation with Rob, right? He's all about like crisis management, crisis situations. And I think that's another event where the values are so important for you to have, because if you don't know your values, when a crisis hits, you can take the wrong decisions. And so that's kind of my next question. When I think you have this like I forgot the word, acronym that you
Yeah.
use to determine like what are the situations in which a leader can be triggered with. Could you go into that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So, and I completely agree with what you said. I think so many people internalize situations a bit sometimes, and the best leaders, and again, it's a buzzword that got thrown around a lot, but I truly believe in it, is emotional intelligence. And for me, it's what is it like to be on the receiving end of you? Because if you get triggered and you kind of have that emotional response, etc., that's going to have another impact on somebody else, and that's going to be how your leadership, how your image is then framed. And then that obviously that can have wider repercussions. So if we're thinking about situations that can trigger us, more from a business context, there's a really good kind of acronym called PESTLE, so PESTLE. And simply it stands for the different situations maybe a business can be affected by. There's ones like SWOT, situation, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. PESTLE is a bit more of a developed one. So PESTLE is like what the political, economic, social, technological, I have to remember where I am, technological, legal and environmental. So those are like the different areas that could affect us. So political is very obvious. I won't speak too much of that. We're in a very politically charged world. I'm just going to say the whole world seems politically charged. But you can see how certain politics can actually affect businesses and how that can affect, you just think you're laughing, Gabby, because you know the amount of conversations it really sparks and the anger and all the rest of it. So that can be an obvious one. I suppose in economic crises, in the UK, we're slightly experiencing a bit of a dip in job market and kind of career opportunities and stuff like that. That can obviously kind of trigger you to have a response. And all the rest of it, social, technological, I should say. Artificial intelligence is clearly a big factor in that. And how, if your business is not ready to work in a world which is AI enabled, how's that going to work out? So those are just at a real high level to think about what are some of the bigger influences from a macro point of view that might affect you and your business. How might that trigger you in terms of your response? And then, like you said, with values, usually when something really hits the core of your being, that's when values show themselves. And if I give, an example, I've got one of my strongest values. My 4 values are freedom, fulfillment, integrity, and lifelong learning. Now, freedom for me is the strongest value. That's the most important value to me. So if something challenges my freedom, Could be anything from like someone trying to limit where I can move or go, or whether somebody is limiting the people I get to work with or the locations I have to work at, anything like that. That usually triggers a response. And I only know that because I've had, past situations. So when I now make a decision in terms of my business and what I do, I always bear in mind both physical and financial freedom. How is it going to impact those areas? Okay, if I do this role, I have to be at a certain site once a week for the next 12 months. Well, that's going to be a real big decision. That's going to take a lot of me to think about, as opposed to another opportunity comes, it's a one-off, it can be done online, etc., etc. I'm going, yeah, cool, that doesn't change my freedom, I'm happy to do that, let's crack on. So that's like a smaller example of how it happens to me personally. But then the pestle is really good to understand what potential triggers could happen out from a business perspective, and maybe then how does that impact what you do then as a business, or more importantly, how you then lead as a leader, is what I would say. So that hopefully that kind of gives a bit of information about the framework.
Yeah, no, and I think I try to be as proactive as possible with my business and just, things I need to do in life. And I feel that I would take that. It may be every quarter kind of say, okay, what is going at the macro level that could impact me for the next quarter? I live here in the States, and politics, that's a very hot topic. Right now, our
Imagine.
government is shut down. Hopefully, it's going to open soon. But that has led to a lot of consequences, right? Airlines closed. And then also, for example, one of the, I don't know if you have Walmart over there, but here,
Yeah. Equivalent,
what
yeah.
one of the big chains is Walmart. And so they cater, like it's all about like low prices. So a lot of people that go shopping there have these, food stamp benefits to like, if they can afford, buying food, basically they get subsidized from the government. And right now that the government shut down, those benefits have stopped. And so a lot of them, maybe they are angry, they're not thinking through their values, they decided to go and shoplift, steal from the stores, all of this. And so I'm focusing on Walmart because they took the initiative of like how to approach the situation. So they were like, okay, we'll have a time from like I think 6 to 8. I think my mom was telling me where those people could go. There was going to be a special section to for them to go and buy from there. So they, I don't know, maybe the top leadership was like, okay, let's look at our values, how we can approach the situation. And again with Walmart, you were bringing me just like flashbacks when I was in college. They are known for being frugal. So their top leadership, even when they went to conferences, instead of booking like a 5-star hotel, they will book a motel because those are cheaper. So they were living their values even in those instances. And I was like, okay, I guess there are some businesses that are showcasing their values. They're not just on paper.
Yeah, and no, it's a really good example. It's a really good topical example. I suppose a key word that gets bandied about is innovation. So again, to make it super practical, an organisation might say we're really, innovation, we really value it, it's really important, etc. They got it on their wallpaper, on their kind of HQ, all the rest of it. But I suppose values in action is how does that actually play out? So if you look at your kind of metrics, your KPIs, and how people are kind of basically marked, whether it's an end of year assessment or one-to-ones, etc. Based on what they've done, they might be incentivized to just kind of do the doing, make sure things are slightly the same but a little bit better, keep the lights on essentially. Whereas innovation is basically wanting you to change and break things. You need to break things and see what happens and have new kind of test ideas and see if that's more step change rather than just like micro change. So like 1% changes is like small things change, whereas step change is like a massive big change in a process, and it kind of improves the organisation a lot bigger. So I think innovation for me, I've heard organisations literally do that where they have a separate team that literally their sole goal is to break the business. Their sole goal is to think about how could we break this business and almost make this business obsolete within kind of 5 years. and I forgot that the name is just escaped me, but it's a massive. It might be Dell or it might be BlackBerry, but it was a massive business that basically made this concept first popular, and a lot of organisations are now kind of catching on. So their goal is to try and break things and improve things, and almost make the current business, obsolete in the next 5 to 10 years. Wow. And what happens is obviously they come up with solutions and ways to then mitigate that as a business to make sure they're not broken in 5 10 years and they're still around and kind of be in a big market share. So I think we can talk about high level values and how things trigger us both individually but also as a business, but then for me it's all about making it practical. Okay, something really triggered me, what's my values in that moment? I feel like it's kind of challenging my freedom. Okay, what can I do in line with my freedom to preserve my freedom, because it's the most important value for me in deciding or kind of, deciding what to do in this situation. So for me as a leader, if you also feel like you're not serving those values, you're going to feel inauthentic, you're not going to feel, very trustworthy, you're probably not going to come across very warm to different people. And that's how we take it to a real micro level. Once we understand what we are as a business and what we want to be known for, that's where we take it to a micro level of how do you actually lead teams and respond to business challenges in the world that are actually congruent to who you are and who you want to be known as, is what I'd say.
Yeah. And that leads me into this next question, right? So they're hearing us and they say, Michael, okay, I just accepted that my values need some work. You know, they're sort of trying to understand their values and their triggers. How do they actually create an environment where their team thrives? Like, what's the first step they can take? I remember from that prior conversation we had, you were like, it can even be as simple as hiring the right people. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two key takeaways I want to kind of give away with this, and that's the importance of a leader and the hiring the right people. To keep it really basic. So for me, I'm just going to start quickly with the importance of a leader. If you think about like a business's kind of life cycle, and maybe you're a startup business, it's just 1 to 10 people, or maybe you're becoming more that 50 mark, or then eventually you become a larger business when you're more like 1,000 odd employees at minimum, and you're kind of different geographical locations. What I find is there's, like a roller coaster effect of how important is the leader. When you first start, especially as a business startup, of course you need to have a really cool idea, really cool concept of the business, things need to be working clearly, but the leader is so important to attract investment, money, people, etc. That leader is really, really important. When you see like a leader starts a new organisation and they've kind of had a massive business in Meta or Facebook, they leave Meta or Facebook, they start a new kind of offshore. Who is that leader? Oh, they were ex-Meta, ex-Facebook, etc. They use it to market themselves to build that business. Now, that leader, usually one of the reasons why they're a really big leader is because of their values and who they are and who they're known for, how they act. But then as an organisation builds, it's more just about the benefits a business can give you. So when you get to like that mid-sized business, really the key thing you get to recruit people is what benefits can you give me? But then when you then get over that crux and you get to the really top elite, the top 10 organisations, your Apples and all the rest of it, it goes full circle back to the leader. Because at that level, they're all going to give you amazing benefits. But you want to work for a leader that's driving, is at the cutthroat of technology, is changing things, who I would say serves and wears their values on their sleeve. So that's where, for me, it's really important to put it into action, is to first realise why we're even bothering, is to realise the importance of your leaders, both at the senior level and also the kind of the coal face, as we call the UK, the actual operational leaders, because those are really key at those two ends of the spectrum of a business, to actually encourage you to get the right talent and to be bigger and to grow efficiently. So that's the why. Why are we even bothering doing this? Is because of the importance the leader plays. Then very quickly, easily, is value-based recruitment. It went through a bit of a trend, but for me, values-based recruitment is we need to make sure whenever we employ people, we think of 4 things. Are they competent? Are they motivated? Are they compatible? And do they have kind of good awareness of where they're landed in terms of the industry? So competency is obvious. We know what questions we can ask. We can test that with different things. Motivation for me is really important. Why do they want to do it? Commercial awareness is quite easy to test and see. But compatibility, you could be amazing at your job, but if you don't fit the culture of that team or that organisation, we've seen how one bad egg can lead to multiple people leaving the business. So that's why values-based recruitment is important for me, because it nails the compatibility piece. And now a values-based question could be, we have a value at X business around curiosity. can you give me an example of the last time you changed your mind on something? So it's like not forcing someone to give a textbook answer of this is my great star example of, this is when I led an amazing project. No, we want people who are really strong and think strongly about what they want to do, but are open to change and curious to go, actually, I thought this before, and now I've changed my mind. So that is forcing someone to give a real example, could be professional or personal, of how they've actually put curiosity into action. So that, like, of course, you can delve into deeper of like what's the industry, what kind of values-based questions we're doing, all the rest of it. But at a real high level, that's one way to actually make sure you get the right type of person, not just someone who's good at the job, because we can often find that quite easily. You want to make sure they're actually compatible for your business and get to the place, this is the dream place, where your culture is self-cleansing. We have so many amazing people who are values-driven, are all part of the same tribe, that if someone sneaks through, they're really sneaky, they sneak through the recruitment process and they haven't got the right values, you've got people in the organisation that will sniff it out and will challenge them and have those conversations in a respectful manner that will self-cleanse, self-police that organisation and that culture. So it's almost like if you start doing that from the beginning, you'll get to a magical place eventually where you have so many people who are values-driven and have that culture that they will then be able to spot people who are not in alignment with that down the line as well. So that's why just two kind of ways, I think, is just to start putting it into action of actually what values in action looks like from a business point of view.
Yeah, and it's very critical. I've been on both sides of the spectrum, right? So I'm still working full time as I built my business on the side, and I think one of the things that has allowed this startup where I work to be successful is that when the CEO was recruiting the key founding members, right, he was looking at those values, right? Like, we were hardcore players. We were going to go all in no matter what time it was going to be, like late at night or whatever. And once we recruited people, we were going to look for those same values. And that's what he said. The organization is going to scale, but having y'all as a foundation, I feel at peace that things are going to work out. And so far, things are working well. But then I was working with another client on my business regarding operations, and she thought that just increasing the price, like the salary for that position, was going to be like the key. That person was hired, but like one of the values that she likes is like be able to wear many hats, help wherever possible, right? And that person was more into like, I'm just going to do this role and that's it. Then there was a conflict, right, between the team members because of that. And then I was like, I sort of told you. But essentially, we just have to go through that process to make sense in our head. But yeah, I've seen both of those, and I do see how it's critical to hire the people not only that have the capability and the knowledge in that area, but have also are connected with our values within the company.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. I'm not here to say let's just employ anybody. We've got similar interests and tastes, so I'm just going to employ them. That's not what I'm saying. I think you're spot on. They need to be clearly competent in the role. But the way you get those A-star players, for me, is there's loads of people who are competent and who can do a job. But there's not as many people who are going to be there and create the culture and allow your organisation to thrive in the future. Because at the end of the day, you don't want just anyone to be a leader. You want the leader to be essentially, replicating your vision, your passion for the organisation. So for me, I think you're spot on. It's a balanced, obviously we're having this on the podcast, but the more you get to know an organisation, it's got to be a real nuanced approach between competency and also values for me. So I think you're really kind of attuned to kind of raise that is what I'd say.
Yeah, I would say for my founders listening in the audience, our leaders, there's going to be times where, people leave the company in a rush, or unfortunately someone, gets sick and can come back, or they pass away. And then they're like, the first sense is like, let's just hire whoever. I would say hang in there, but please take your time to hire someone correctly. I've also been through that where we fire someone to be like the patch, the temporary patch, and that just screwed us so much more than just waiting. So I would say take your time, hire the correct person, and then everything else will fall into place. But yeah, just so critical. It's so critical.
Yeah. Hire slow, fire fast. Hire slow, fire fast.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but I do think going back to the values conversation, how everything this, gets put together, spend time with your values as a person, but also as a company. If you, after hearing this conversation, you're like, hey, Michael, hey, Gabby, I've read my values on the wall. We're not living any of those. Maybe it's time to, get together, do an assignment, a little, I don't know, workshop, do them again. And, or maybe call Michael and say, hey Michael, we need a workshop with you. What do you think, Michael, about that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. I think for me, a big part of what I do is trying to serve from a place of value, because a lot of people can do the initial kind of work themselves. Clearly, I kind of support people on that journey and on that path, but I think you can start off by finding, I have a free one. You can find it on my website, and I'm sure that link will be here. But it's a free resource, so you don't have to pay, and simply it's a link to like a values inventory. And it takes you through an exercise, a task which you can do more as an individual, especially good for a leader, to find out more about themselves and kind of how they want to serve, and probably how they best serve. Because often when you're acting in alignment with your values, that's when you're in a bit of a state of flow and you're doing your best work, is what I would say. So I think start that process to find out more about yourself, and then no doubt you can start doing that as a wider organisation, or maybe as a senior leadership team. You can even, I would argue, see then how values contrast or contradict each other. So, typical kind of thing, I'm sure people know, but when you build an organisation, the best thing to do is to find people who have skills that you don't have, and they kind of complement you. But if you think of a senior leadership team, if you've got values that actually contradict each other, it's really good to know that and have that self-awareness, so when you have certain conversations in the future and people start bucking their heads, you can understand the reason, the rationale why, and you can say, oh, you might even go, I can see your freedom values is talking to me, Gabby, here, and I appreciate, I just want to be clear, I'm not trying to impact boom, boom, boom. The reason why I am suggesting this is because I think this will have this impact for the organisation going forward, hence da-da-da-da. And then that person will feel really seen and heard, that you go, no, I'm not trying to impact your freedom and say you can't do this and you can't do anything else. I understand what you're thinking. This is the rationale for why I'm doing this. And that person will be much more on board, or much more likely to then take your opinion, your feedback on board and have a conversation with you. So you can eventually get to the point where you literally call out people's values and say, I'm hearing you're saying this and you feel like I'm challenging this. What I'm trying to say is this, and that allows someone to then open their ears and actually kind of work more collaboratively with you. That's, for me, is like the dream place to kind of get to, is what I'd say.
No, I think that's perfect. That's key. You have given us so many action items, right? And so many things to think about and reflect. I'm definitely going to hear this after we record it. I have to edit it, but just like taking some time to write these notes, because you just given us so much like golden items that we can have there, when things happen, and we can go back and look to it and, fix things right now, as well. And, we had such a great conversation, Michael. But before we wrap it up, I always like to leave my audience with a thought in mind. And so for you, I want to ask you, there's a lot of founders, and they know that their team culture is not working. People are leaving, or they're checked out. And they probably think it's because of the perks or the pay. What permission or reality check do you want to give them?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really good question. I think the kind of reality check I want to give is, depending on the size of your organisation, so it will differ slightly, is to look at yourself in the mirror first. And to really realise, I suppose, how are your values actually being played out, whether it's a company or whether it's you personally. And I suppose to do that framework of actually realise what has triggered you, what were the emotions you were feeling and trying to avoid, and what was the biggest fear that you thought might be realised, that might happen. I think those are the key things for me, because once you uncover, and I always say, I want people to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. So once you uncover that uncomfortable truth about the real reason why someone might be leaving, the real reason why you might not be achieving the goals you want to achieve, whether it's individually or as a business, I think you can actually then take action. Because until we get self-awareness on the problem and the understanding, and we kind of stop kidding ourselves for actually how important a leader is in a business to be a success, once you start uncovering the real truth that hurts, you can then take action on it. So for me, you might find there's a common theme to the events you get triggered by. You can get self-awareness on that. Why is that? What does it say about me as a person? And once you start to undiscover that and kind of strip it back, I suppose, I would argue you can then become a much more, empowering leader going forward. And that's more one of the reasons that will actually attract people, resources, talent, money, to your organisation and allow you to achieve what you want to do. So for me, hopefully that allows you to realise values aren't just pretty words on a piece of paper. They can actually help uncover the core fundamentals of what you do, and actually can be your core unique selling point to attract the right talent to allow you to achieve those goals.
Wow, this is awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, for all these golden nuggets and for joining me today to share all of this information with our audience. To our audience, I will be leaving information about Michael, how you can connect with him in the show notes. So feel free to reach out to him. He's very active on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with him there if you have an account. If not, it's free to create one. And yeah, again, to everyone listening, if you're struggling with, team culture, high turnover, or just feeling like your values aren't actually driving your business, there's a fix. Listen back to this episode and do all of the action items that Michael, put out there. And remember, your team's experiences start with you. When you lead from your true values, everything else falls into place. Thanks for listening, everyone, and I'll see you in our next episode. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Gabby.